Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video. The breaking news tonight: Antonio Conte and Tottenham have officially parted ways. It was kind of writing on the wall for a while now. We kind of expected this to come, whether it be in the immediate future or at the end of the season when his contract had expired. But it does seem that it is now officially happened, done, dusted, and confirmed that tonight Tottenham have officially announced the parting of Antonio Conte as their head coach. Does that open the door now for Julian Nagelsmann? Does that open the door for another manager to come in and be a successor? We're going to be talking all about Tottenham's statement, Tottenham's season, because we seem to talk about a lot about Tottenham in recent weeks because, let's face it, they're the only thing that's really exciting that's happening in recent times. But let's face it, we kind of knew this was going to happen. We're going to be talking about it. We're going to be talking about Tottenham, Conte, potential future successors to him, and everything else in between. But before we go any further, I would like to remind you to please like the video and also subscribe if you're new. Both things are always and forever greatly appreciated. But for now, let's get into the video. Let's talk Antonio Conte. Let's talk Tottenham. Look, we've talked about Tottenham a lot these past few weeks, like I say. We talked about Conte. We talked about the season has been a season in which promised a lot and delivered very little. There was a lot of optimism and excitement going into the season, as there usually is from a Tottenham perspective when it comes to the kind of transfers they made in the transfer window. Antonio Conte is the manager, a known domestic winner, serial winner across many domestic competitions at the clubs he's been at. Harry Kane obviously leading the front line. Heung-Min Son fresh off winning the Golden Boot last season. Dejan Kulusevski coming into his own. Bentancur in the midfield. Christian Romero, seemingly a godsend of a centre-back, according to some Tottenham fans. He hasn't panned out that way in the slightest, and now it's all come to a head right now with 10 games left of the season that Antonio Conte has left Spurs, has left Tottenham, and will no longer be in charge of the club. Tottenham put out a statement earlier this evening saying, "We can announce that head coach Antonio Conte has left the club by mutual agreement. We achieved Champions League qualification in Antonio's first season at the club. We thank Antonio for his contribution and wish him well for the future. Christian Stellini will take the team as acting head coach for the remainder of the season, along with Ryan Mason as assistant head coach." Fair, short and sweet, as normally these kinds of statements are by clubs that have just parted ways with their manager. The first one I'd like to address is mutual agreement. Maybe in the public eye it might be said and seen as mutual agreement. I'm not 100% sure. I do find it strange that Tottenham have waited a week for this. That might tie into maybe the Julian Nagelsmann thing. We obviously do know that Thomas Tuchel was reportedly close to signing with Tottenham and being the successor to Antonio Conte last week, before obviously he instead ended up switching and rejecting them in favour of Bayern Munich. Does the Nagelsmann thing now, has that sped this thing up? Is that going to happen? Obviously, it doesn't seem that way with the whole Stellini will be taking charge of the club, of the team, and for the remainder of the season. Is that, again, just talk to kind of suggest that we haven't got anything waiting wing? They're keeping their cards close to their chest. Could Nagelsmann come in within like a week or two's time? Obviously, time will tell on that. The mutual agreement thing, though, just doesn't necessarily sit right with me. I mean, let's face it, Conte pretty much handed in his resignation with that explosive interview he gave after that 3-3 draw with Southampton last week. Obviously, since then, a lot has been made about it. A lot has been talked about it. And we came to the conclusion that Tottenham are in a 50-50 here. They either get rid of him, and that's a massive gamble towards their Champions League status for next season, or they keep him. Again, a bit of a gamble, but probably not as much of a gamble as maybe losing him, in my opinion. And they risk maybe breaking the squad even more in the long run, and for the next manager to kind of pick up the pieces with. Very intriguing that term of phrase was used and whether that was actually legit or not. But let's face it, we talked about Conte before. We talked about how he clearly didn't want to be there anymore. He clearly was fed up with compromises to his seemingly very specific demands. We talk about how he's not trusting the players, how the players are not seemingly playing for him, or in his eyes are not playing for him. He's calling his own teammates out, calling his own squad members out. He's throwing them under the bus, and he's acting like he's completely blameless, even though he's not. And there were just all these things that were obviously being thrown around between the club and the manager, and it was and like I say, it was doomed. Not necessarily doomed to fail right from the beginning. Had obviously the very specific demands seemingly be met of Antonio Conte, but let's face it, it's Tottenham. It's Daniel Levy, it's the ownership, it's the board, it's the everything else in between that happens behind the scenes that we're never going to see eye to eye with Conte. And let's face it, when Conte's angry, Conte will let you know about it. We've seen in the past with the other clubs he's been at, like Chelsea, like Inter Milan, where if things don't go Conte's way, he'll take matters into his own hands. And that's seemingly what he did when he went into bat for himself during that press conference he did after that Southampton game. And like I say, I think if obviously Thomas Tuchel hadn't have rejected Tottenham in favour of Bayern Munich, this news might have broke a few days prior. Obviously now the whole Julian Nagelsmann situation is still very much up in the air. There's a lot of speculation surrounding his future now that he's a free agent, of course, and Tottenham were heavily linked. And again, we talked about that a couple of days ago as well. It's another big gamble for Spurs. It's another big moment for Spurs. Will they go for Nagelsmann or is someone else waiting in the wings? Obviously, we talked about Pochettino. Pochettino coming in would be seen, in my opinion, in my eyes, as a backward step. You go from a guy who got you so far. Tottenham didn't necessarily back him as much as they probably backed the other managers that have come in after him. I think they even backed probably Nuno better than what they did Poch for the past couple of years during his reign there, even though he did lead them to a second place finish and a Champions League final, let's not forget. But again, you'll only get to a certain point with Poch, and then it's a question of whether or not you back him even more or whether you bring in a manager with a higher profile that can probably raise the standards even more so of the club you get. And who's to say that he's going to be the same Pochettino? Who's to say that he can still go toe-to-toe with some of the bigger clubs in this division? Who's to say that he can go toe-to-toe with Manchester City right now with Erling Haaland leading their attack? Who's to say that he can go toe-to-toe with an Arsenal side who have gone leaps and bounds, head and shoulders above Tottenham this season, despite obviously Tottenham being, for the past several years or so, finishing above them in the league repetitively, and obviously being in a bit of a downfall by Arsenal's usual high standards. Who's to say that he can go up against the Manchester United side that are slowly rebuilding under Erik ten Hag, and with obviously new ownership potentially coming in at Old Trafford, will get even stronger? Who's to say that we'll go up against the Chelsea side with a very big project, a very long-term project, a very big and ambitious project ahead for them? Who's that might even go up against Liverpool, for example, who may come back even stronger next season should obviously the right investment and everything be made with that club? There's a lot of question marks surrounding Pochettino. I've said time and time again that I think they may turn their attention to Diego Simeone should he leave Atletico at the end of the season, and I think that he probably will. But there's also this Nagelsmann thing now. There's also Nagelsmann coming in, or potentially coming in, who is a young manager, an exciting manager, a fresh new face in management, a manager who obviously built his profile and reputation at clubs that had big projects going and obviously rebuilds going in terms of Hoffenheim and RB Leipzig, and of course now has experience of being Bayern Munich manager, winning the Bundesliga with Bayern Munich, of course, going through all of that, doing well in the Champions League on a grand stage with both Leipzig and, of course, Bayern. to an extent, of course. I think that it was a bit of a failure last year for Bayern, but at least with Leipzig, he actually did overachieve somewhat during his time there on that big stage. He could be a long-term project guy, and I think that's what Tottenham need right now, a big, big, big rebuild. Are they gonna like tie down Kulusevski? Can he get the best out of Heung-min Son again? Can he obviously rediscover Son's amazing form that he's obviously shown these past few seasons? Can he convince Harry Kane maybe to obviously stay and try and go again with Spurs and maybe finally win some sort of trophy going forward to see out his career? And will he rebuild this squad? There's a lot of question marks with the entirety of the squad, entirety of the club. And obviously, a lot of Spurs fans might be sat there tonight thinking, we got rid of Conte, but we're just going to bring in a new manager, and it's going to be the same hierarchy, it's going to be the same board people, it's going to be the same ownership, it's going to be the same this, the same that going on behind the scenes, and nothing will change. And maybe so. Maybe nothing will change in terms of that aspect. Or maybe this time, maybe Spurs might get it right. Maybe they'll bring in a new manager. Maybe they'll have a change of direction, a change of focus. Or maybe they'll just get it right at some point along the way. Very unlikely. It is Spurs after all. They even noted his achievement of getting them Champions League football, which is something that Spurs have managed to achieve most seasons in recent memory. Of course, he got them back in it last season and got them back into the top four last season and everything did Conte. But again, that's basically seen by some Tottenham fans and even by the Tottenham board seemingly as being the pinnacle that this team can achieve. When if they actually pulled their finger out more and they went above and beyond, they could have achieved more by now. And they probably should have achieved more by now. But obviously didn't happen. And when you consider the kind of managers that they've had, some well-known managers, notorious winners, Conte, Mourinho, a rebuild manager in Pochettino, Nuno Espirito Santo, who was their 13th, 14th, 15th choice of manager during that period of time in which everybody under the sun seemingly got interviewed for that job and no one wanted it, or they couldn't find the right person, whichever way, shape or form that obviously job interview went. It's another new manager that's coming in with another with another philosophy, another set of ideas, another way of playing. Just a lot of change once again occurring with Tottenham as we go forward again. And like I say, for the immediate future, for this current season, look, whether or not Stellini is going to be in charge or not for the remainder of the season remains to be seen. It remains to be seen if, obviously, Tottenham will announce something in a few days' time going, the new manager will take over immediately, or whether he'll take over at the end of the season. I'm not 100% sure. I think Tottenham are just trying to get through. Obviously, taking it off face value, it reads to me that Tottenham will address their options and address the situation at the end of the season. They just want to get this season over and done with. Because it does seem strange that maybe Conte was your best chance of getting top four. Maybe Conte, even though obviously it seemed very toxic and it seemed very just awkward, shall we say, at that club at this time, Conte was probably the best chance that this side has probably got of securing top four for the rest of the season. You remove him, okay, you might remove a big part of the toxicity in that club right now, in terms of how he's thrown players under the bus, in terms of how he's seemingly taken no responsibility or took none of the blame on himself of how Tottenham's season has gone. But of course, he's still a top manager. He's still a great manager with a lot of experience and a lot of winning mentality and a lot of winning history. And he did seem broken at the end. But top four seemingly there for the taking for Spurs, in a good position to obviously take that, barring obviously games in hand from the teams below them. But no one's seemingly putting together a bit of consistent form right now. Liverpool hit and miss sometimes, especially away from home. Newcastle, do they score enough goals? That kind of thing. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the top 4 race will unfold this season. But one thing we do know is that Antonio Conte will not be there to see it out for the rest of the campaign with Tottenham. He and Spurs have parted ways officially tonight in a move that I think a lot of people saw coming. I just don't think a lot of people probably saw it coming this soon. What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on Antonio Conte and Spurs parting ways? These are, of course, the thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it, of this guy. I want to know what you guys think. What are your own thoughts on Conte and Tottenham parting ways? What are your own thoughts on Spurs' season and Spurs going forward? Who do you think Spurs will find to succeed Conte going forward? Will it be a Nagelsmann? Will it be Pochettino's return? Will someone else be waiting in the wings to pounce on this opportunity? I'd love to know what you guys think, feel, your opinions, your predictions, whatever you want to call it, all down below in the comment section, because it's short, it'll make for interesting reading. Otherwise, hit that like button on the way. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new and want to see more content like this. Both things always and for a bit greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Talks video, and I'll see you all again soon in another video.